How's it going, everybody? We've got some changes on the show this week. We'll get into those in just a second. But before further ado, if you're new to the show, welcome to the What's Next show from the folks here at AWS. My name's Nick. I'm a developer advocate here at AWS. I'm one of the co-hosts on this channel.
Yeah, and I'm Robert. Together, Nick and I have run a couple episodes of this show already, huh? Episode 9.
Yeah,
Time flies.
it's been quite wild. We started off, I think, on a monthly cadence. We've pushed the envelope, moved it up to every 3 weeks, and now here we are, blazing fast at one episode every 2 weeks. It's been quite exciting, but there's no other way that I would have it myself. So yeah, welcome back to anyone in the chat who's a recurring viewer. To everyone else who's new to the show, welcome. A little bit of let's cover a little bit of the lay of the land here, right? So this is a live show. You're probably watching from one of two places. That would be either twitch.tv/AWS or our LinkedIn channel. We're live on both platforms. If you're watching from a channel that is not one of those two, please let me know. I'd be curious where people are rebroadcasting this. But namely, all jokes aside, the reason I point that out is because we want this to be a bit of a back and forth with all of you that are there in the audience watching from home. So if you're in Twitch, use those PogChamp emotes in chat. Let us know what you're thinking if you have any questions. If you're in LinkedIn, we'll be watching that chat as well. And if you have any questions, again, we will be bringing those up on the broadcast. But Rob, I've spoken a lot so far, but for folks that are new to the channel, they probably don't even know what the show's about.
Yeah, well, apparently they can expect a couple of technical hiccups. That comes with the lay of the land. I suppose we didn't make enough sacrifice to the demo gods today. But I think one of the coolest things that you can expect from this show is that we have expert guests from service teams to dive deep on the latest feature launches and products that we're shipping at AWS. It's really a front row seat to everything that happens now. We really pride ourselves on kind of building what the customer asks for, moving quickly. And in some ways, we do that so well that it becomes a problem because people have a hard time keeping up with what matters to them. At any point when you say, like, what does it look like to use the state-of-the-art tools on AWS to get your job done? Well, that changes over time, as you should expect. And so what we hope for is that this show is one of these resources where you can look at the topics and you can say, hey, that's something that's really interesting to me. I want to join in. Or I think it's generally interesting because I think there's a lot of cases where you get a lot of these ideas, right? You listen to a service launch and you go, okay, well, I wasn't quite thinking about it that way. But now that you mention it, maybe we can divert our architecture. Maybe we can incorporate that. Maybe that saves us time, money, whatever, in a way that we hadn't even considered. So I think there's a lot of benefit to just kind of exposure to these new topics, even if you're not specifically looking for a solution. But that's the way I would frame
Yeah,
the
exactly.
value.
Maybe there'll be one of the demos that we'll show in a bit that is right up your alley, and if that's the case, you're in for a real treat. We sort of run this show with two main types of segments. To open things up, Rob and I are going to talk in just a moment about some of the exciting launches that we found in the last 2 weeks, since we're running the show bi-weekly now. But then after that, what we really think to be the crown jewel of this show is, right to Rob's point, we're bringing service team members that built these products to show you what it looks like to use in practice. I consume a lot of the newest launches through, let's say tweets or an RSS feed from the blog. But I just think personally that there's something much more real and tangible to seeing it in action. Because if I wanted to go use it, I'd probably be repeating a lot of the steps that we're going to show on today's stream for each of those services. It's I like to joke that AWS What's Next is my favorite launch-related live AWS show, but I don't know if we have too much stiff competition in that regard. So I'm keeping the medal right here in the meantime, at least. Cool. Well, I think everything is looking stable. So without further ado, why don't we get into some of the launches that we want to talk about today? Does that sound good, Rob?
Yeah, let's do it. So first up, we have an announcement that I think a lot of S3 users are going to be excited about. This is FSX for Lustre support with automatic updates for S3. Now, to help you unpack that, the S3 team has been working on this feature for a while, where they have kind of native integration with FSX for Lustre. What this really means is that you can kind of consume S3 as a file system. almost like mounting it, like a USB drive or something. Imagine you can take an S3 bucket and just connect it to one of your EC2 instances, and now that folder, that bucket appears as a native extension of the file system. There's a little bit of a couple steps in there, but that's effectively what they're going for in terms of user experience. And what's really cool about this feature is that if you used to want to do this, you have to build all that yourself, but now it's baked into to S3, and it's available for you to use. You can configure it in a matter of minutes, just like all the other features in S3. So really turnkey solution. And then if that's a use case you have where you want to write files to S3, you want to read files from S3, you don't need. It was always really easy with the AWS SDK from the CLI, but now the fact that you can mount it on a file system is
I was personally not an FSX for Lustre user previously, but I'd imagine that this exact workflow was something a lot of folks were probably building themselves to achieve this sort of this syncing functionality. So having that moved in-house and have you not need to maintain that is just another thing it's just another piece of undifferentiated heavy lifting taken away from developers, so you can focus on building the features that you really care about instead of the plumbing that makes that possible to do. Rob's laughing because this is just the term that we use a lot at AWS, but if you've watched the show, I think there hasn't been a single episode that has gone by where it hasn't come up at least once. So we're getting that one out of the way nice and early today, not even waiting for the guest sessions.
Won't someone think of the plumbers?
Think of the plumbers. Yeah, we're just the engineers at AWS are really just cloud plumbers. That's what the certifications are for, right? That's your cloud plumbing license, right?
Got a comment in Twitch. First link doesn't work. Which link are you referring to? Which link are you referring to?
One of the short codes for FSX for Lustre. We could probably go and hunt that one down. But yeah, so moving on, we have had another very exciting launch with which I would imagine is also a common workflow. And that is being able to translate documents natively in the Microsoft Office format. So a little bit of a step back here. So Amazon Translate, a managed AI service that enables you to do source to destination language translation for text. It can additionally do auto detection of the source language, and it does it has highly accurate, extremely fast, cost-effective translations. Pretty much all of the vectors, in the green direction that you would want them for something like translation. But a lot of data that lives out in the wild is in these data formats like Word documents or Excel files or PowerPoints and so on. Even on our team, Rob, we present and deliver information and educational material globally. Manually having to rip that data out or a script and then translating it and then putting that into another slide deck, it's just onerous, right? And so the ability to do that natively and translate now is very slick. It is as simple as quite literally, instead of passing in the text in the body of the API call to translate, instead what you do is you pass in the path to the S3 object that is the document that you want translated, and then the output will also be a document in the same native file structure directly in S3 as well. So a really slick sort of user experience that I'd imagine there you could build a pipeline for. You extract the data, you perform the translation, you try and pipe it back into another document, but this is just a much easier experience for something that I think a lot of customers have been trying to do.
Yeah, really well said. And it just goes to show that this is the kind of feature where incrementally, when you see one of these features standalone, you're like, okay, that makes sense. It makes sense to build that. But these are the kinds of features that we're shipping on a regular basis as a result of customer feedback. And the difference over time is actually massive, right? If you think about the compounding features and the utility of a service like this, as it grows over time to include more and more common formats, more and more common use cases, you end up with a tool that can really save you a lot of time right out of the box with zero configuration. And that's one of the areas that I really like, especially our AI services, our turnkey AI services, where you don't need a lot of ML hands-on training and expertise to start using these things. They can deliver value immediately. You don't have to train your algorithms. You don't have to set up, test data versus training data. A lot of this pipeline, gets collapsed down. And the other thing I really like about AI services, and we'll talk more about later, so I don't want to spoil everyone's appetite here, but the fact that a lot of these services are now building in these escape hatches for customization. So hopefully that's a topic that we can revisit later.
One last thing on the translate support for Office is like do you really want to spend your time munging around with like the XML open office data format to try and like just get the text out in a form that's encoded in the way that you want and re-encode it? Like, no, no one wants to do that because that's just getting in the way of actually doing what you want to do. So yeah, I mean, to your point, Rob, it's, you know, these things that largely can look like little checkboxes or optional parameters are replacing not just other incremental features, but entire pipelines that you would have to build and maintain over time. And, you know, I have enough problems with trying to reopen and edit multiple versions of, an Office document in different versions of Office. So, you know, I can't imagine what building and maintaining a pipeline like that would look like. So having that bundled to translate is a-okay for me.
Absolutely. Next up, we have an announcement for community builders. So we have a new community builders program, and this is a very interesting launch, I think, because some of you may have heard of the AWS Heroes program. And what both these programs showcase is the fact that the community around AWS is one of the key features. Just think back to how exciting it is when you meet a fellow AWS user and you talk about how you built your services, how you solved problems, how you saved money. It's very nice to be able to connect with people who have that kinds of hands-on builder experience, just like you do, right? The other aspect of the community is that, well, it just means that if you're building something new from scratch, you know where to go for help. You know that there's a community of people out there who've probably dealt with these same problems before. And so those are just two of the many benefits of building a really healthy community and ecosystem. And what we've heard over the years is that there are a lot of people out there who are really passionate about AWS. They want to get involved in helping us build the community and grow the community, but they just don't know how. We're not providing enough resources to get them started, not enough mentorship, not enough opportunities to engage with service teams. And this community builders program is exactly a response to that request. Right? We launched this, I think, end of July. Is that right? And then what basically we have here is we have an open application system. So anybody who is passionate about AWS, you can apply. We're going to drop the link in the chat where you can apply here. But if you're an AWS enthusiast, or even if you're not that technically deep with AWS, we still encourage you to apply, because one of the benefits of this program, as opposed to the Heroes program, for example, is that we provide a lot of mentorship and learning opportunities to scale up your skills, right? So just to recap, the main benefits of joining the program here are you get to interact with AWS service teams, you get some preview access to new services and features, you get mentorship from subject matter experts. We're going to be running a lot of topics and content creation, workshops, builder labs, all sorts of cool things. And then we're going to help you out with promotional credits so that you can help grow the AWS community. So if you consider yourself a passionate AWS user, you're an AWS enthusiast, please consider applying. It's a great program, and we really look forward to meeting you and having you in it. Or if you know somebody who is such a person, then by all means, send the link to them and have them take a look.
Yeah, well put. I mean, I know we talk a lot about technical launches here, and we talk a lot about, and we'll see in a moment, live demos. But I'm always excited and thrilled to see these community-oriented announcements and launches because, some of these folks in the community are so outstanding. We have, let's say, the AWS Heroes program, and many people that are watching right now either may be a hero or no one, and that's not by accident, right? There are so many members of the community that do such good work, and we want to be able to enable and hopefully in the long term grow more and more folks to be able to become heroes and deliver that same value and help their communities. So very excited about the Community Builders program and the ability for folks to start self-selecting and sort of opting in to trying to get that growth and that mentorship. So very happy that we're able to provide that. Cool. Well, last up on the news segment here before we get into our first demo, it is the launch of AWS Wavelength Zones, now open in both Boston and San Francisco. So this is, I guess, technically the generally available launch of Wavelength Zones. A little bit of recap here for folks that may not have seen them previously. Wavelength was announced at reInvent 2019 as a joint venture between AWS and many other telecom providers, namely Verizon, as well as some others in other regions. But this week we launched it, and we had this exciting Twitch stream. I was a host on the session. But what makes Wavelength so exciting is the ability for AWS customers to now extend the network coverage and the backbone infrastructure into data centers that are managed by extremely like wide-reaching telecom data centers. So what does this mean in practice, right? So let's say I'm trying to deploy my app to US West 1, but there's another location where I know I have a bunch of users that I want to be able to deliver lower latency to. Well, if US West 1 is the closest region, typically that would be a problem. But with Wavelength and Wavelength local zones, it enables you to treat one of these local zones now, let's say in San Francisco, as your own regional deployment endpoint. Or as your own region, and it behaves the same way in your AWS console. So all of this value then and the heavy lifting that gets done on the AWS and on the telecom side here, it enables you to treat these points of presences, or these Wavelength local zones, quite literally what they're called, as their own sort of regions. So very exciting stuff. Again, one in San Francisco and now one in Boston as well. You can read a little bit more about there. And one thing I should not be remiss to mention is the ability of not only to deliver applications closer to the edge, closer to where your users are, but with the advent of 5G networking, the ability to deliver extremely large bandwidth amounts, like gigabits of bandwidth. So sort of that unique combination enables a lot of workloads that were just simply not possible before.
Yeah, exciting stuff. We've seen a lot of developments in the edge computing space over the last few years, and this is another great example of how AWS is taking part of that. This is really important to you, especially if you're building mobile applications where your users are centered around a particular set of geographic locations. So great announcement, great feature.
Yeah, one of the
Please take a look.
last thing on the matter, I think one of the most exciting workloads is sort of, we're thinking about like connected cities, thinking about ML inference at edge. Typically low latency becomes the biggest bottleneck. And so you say, okay, well, if I need this round trip to be very short, I have to perform inference at the device. But the reality is that a lot of these devices inference is extremely power hungry. So if there's anything that's running on battery power, then it's going to get drained very quickly. And vice versa, having heavy and scalable compute is typically not associated with onboard IoT devices, or even wanting to manage your own infrastructure on that edge. So as we see this become available, we expect customers that are in sort of those connected devices, connected cities, ML inference at edge, to really make a lot of use of this. Cool. Well, I do not want to keep the folks waiting. And right now, Rob, you and I are the only things standing between them and some demos. So, folks are probably trickling in right now. Figured we could just give them a quick recap. Hi, welcome. AWS What's Next, live show covering launches. Rob and I just spoke about some of the exciting ones that we found. But even more importantly, we have some demos coming up in just a moment. I always do this, Rob. I always tease and say, are we going to tell them what they have in store today? But it's in the title of the episode, so we should probably just say it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Can't get away with hiding it anymore.
So we right up next, we're going to see a demo on Contact Lens, the newest, very exciting feature for Amazon Connect. And then after that, on the second half of the broadcast, we'll be seeing a demo of Amazon Fraud Detector, one of the newer AI services that we launched. That's why we didn't want to harp on those too much before, because we don't want to steal the thunder from that session. So without further ado, stick around. I've used that transition 3 times now, but we'll see how many folks catch on to the number by the end of the broadcast. So stick around. We'll be back in just a moment with our first guest. All right, everybody, we are back here in the first session and live demo of the day. Again, same hosts, Nick and Rob, but joining us for this very exciting session is Yasser El-Hagan, Head of Solutions Architecture over on the Amazon Connect team. So Yasser, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Yasser, the one, the only. I'm so glad we got you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I think we'll get to what we're alluding at in a moment there with some of the ways that we've seen some of Yasser's work before, but let's sort of take you to task here. So we're talking contact lens for Amazon Connect. A little bit of a mouthful on that launch title, but I think that it the meaning and the value lives up to a long launch name. I know people like to rip on us sometimes for some of these names and titles. So let's start very broad, right? What is contact lens for Amazon Connect?
Yeah, so Contact Lens is a new set of analytics capabilities powered by machine learning that integrate directly within the Amazon Connect product to give you things like key phrase detection, transcription, insights out of those transcriptions, and some really meaningful speech analytics capabilities directly within Amazon Connect.
I feel like people always mention, like, Nick, you like talking about machine learning. You have another machine learning launch later in the session, and we baited everyone, right? We said, like, the first one would not be machine learning, but there you go, right there in the title. We've weaseled AI and machine learning in here. I'm very excited. My ears perked up as soon as I heard that. But yeah, so we spoke about a lot. There's you mentioned a lot. There's lots of really exciting features that I'll ask you about in just a moment. But we have to do a little bit of stage setting. We have Contact Lens and we have Amazon Connect. Connect's clearly having been around for quite some time now. Let's start with the motivation. Why was Contact Lens launched?
Oh,
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, before we do that, can we just take a quick 30-second detour and explain what Amazon Connect is for those in the audience who aren't familiar?
Sure. So Amazon Connect is our easy-to-use omni-channel cloud-based contact center service that scales to support businesses any size. It was pretty much created almost 13 years ago for Amazon.com as they were looking to kind of recreate their customer experiences within their contact centers. Nothing they found out there really kind of fit their needs or scalability or security, so they decided to build it themselves. Fast forward, and we recently launched Amazon Connect a little bit over 3 years ago to pretty much bring the same capability and the same power that Amazon.com uses for their contact centers to our customers.
Now, what does it mean for a contact center to be omni-channel?
Yeah, so Amazon Connect brings together a lot of different things that folks are used to in the contact center space. So we have things like skills-based routing. We do things like voice and chat recording, real-time and historical analytics, all in an omni-channel way, meaning that as a customer engages with you, let's say on a chat channel, and maybe they want to escalate to voice, all that context can be transferred automatically between channels, so that an agent can kind of see that context as a customer engages with a business across different channels.
Yeah, so some
Awesome.
important context that I feel like we had, but were worth reiterating for everyone, bringing up for everyone in the audience. So I'm gonna restamp my question here. So given all of this, why did we build Contact Lens?
Yeah. So when we launched Amazon Connect, it had a certain level of AI capability directly within the product. And what we noticed is that while we had lots of other services, like for example, Amazon Transcribe and Comprehend, and all these great AI and machine learning based services where customers could essentially create their own similar functionality as Contact Lens, the overwhelming feedback we got from customers was, hey, this is great. I understand that AWS has all these awesome services, but I don't want to have to kind of take over and figure out how to build these things and stitch them together and manage all that. I just want all the greatness that comes out of doing that. So that's essentially what we did. We listened to our customers and we brought forward this capability in a really easy to use way where you literally just check a box in Amazon Connect and then you get all the benefits of this capability. And I'll show you that here later today.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to that. I don't want to. I feel like I need a button that just like plays my voice recording when I say this. But when you say it does, you just want the value at the other end, and you don't want to have to stitch it together yourself. Smells like undifferentiated heavy lifting to me. Is this
Exactly.
is this something that a lot of Connect customers were already either A, asking for, or B, trying to build themselves? Because I think that's sort of a recurring trend.
Yeah, I mean, what you'll see even is that last year we put together a solution where we demonstrated to customers how they could build something like this or similar to this themselves. So the need was definitely there. And there's also other products that do speech analytics and so forth in the contact center space. So this isn't necessarily a new capability that customers have been asking for. The new part about it is that you can get it directly within the Amazon Connect platform without having to create integrations and buy things from different third parties and so forth. So it's just really easy to consume.
Yeah. Can you break that example down a little bit further? So you said, customers gave us overwhelming feedback that they didn't want to stitch together these different AI services. Can you just elaborate on maybe just pick one use case there that they were managing themselves and that we're folding into Contact Lens now?
Yeah, so if you think about all the data that's stored in call center recordings, right? So as businesses have conversations with their customers, a lot of times those audio calls are recorded, and there's a tremendous amount of data that can be leveraged there, both from a training perspective, for agents, identifying, what the key issues might be that are happening in your contact center space. So businesses were either consuming third-party integrations that do speech analytics, or as we released other AI services from AWS, they were really excited about being able to use that power of AI and machine learning to go get the data out of things like call recordings. But unfortunately, they'd either have to go buy a third-party product and integrate it with their solution, or use other AWS services that are machine learning powered and create those
So
integrations
I'm going
themselves.
to jump in here on this one. Fans of the show will know I always geek out over the AI and ML topics here, and I talk a lot at events and conferences and such on the AI services. I think they're awesome. So we were smiling cheekily at the top of the broadcast about folks probably having known about your work before, because that very demo that I use all the time in the AI services for the AI services deck of stringing them all together is a contact center one. So even previous to Contact Lens and some of this other functionality, when you said we built it, you're being a little humble over there. It was a demo you built where basically in real time, or certain parts of it were in batch, but customer calls in, you can transcribe their text with Amazon Transcribe, you can translate it to a destination language with Amazon Translate, you can use Comprehend to be able to assess the sentiment on it. And I am sure that there is something else that I'm probably missing, maybe Polly to vocalize that text. But you speak from firsthand experience, having quite literally built that yourself. So it's even more than just customers building it, right? In-house at AWS, when we try to build these reference architectures and demos for customers, if we see pain points, I think that's enough motivation for us to go back to the drawing board and to start building some of these features in-house.
Yeah, absolutely. When we release services like Transcribe and Translate and Comprehend, we all get really excited about what customers and businesses can do with those services. So we always look for ways to kind of bring things together into a holistic solution. And it's really exciting to see that we can take customer feedback and then just simplify that even further, and then add even additional capability more than just if you were to stitch those services together. And that's really what Contact Lens is.
Cool. So we gave a brief overview at the top of the call about Connect. I don't know if we want to dive a little bit deeper into it, but I think it may be fruitful before we sort of get into the nuts and bolts of Contact Lens. So in Connect, you mentioned before that it's this omni-channel. It's everything you'd need in a call center. What is this like, sort of as like a developer, right? To use this, like, what are the entities and the foundational elements that I'm working with inside of Connect?
Yeah, totally. So Amazon Connect really was designed so that it's not so that you don't necessarily need a developer to get a lot out of Amazon Connect, which is really why we built things like integrating Poly directly. Lex is integrated automatically directly within Amazon Connect. But at the same time, we also understand that there's businesses out there that have really complex use cases and want to kind of think outside of the box and do really interesting things to solve their business problems. And for that, absolutely, a set of developers can do some really interesting things with Amazon Connect. For example, right within a contact flow within Amazon Connect, I can invoke a Lambda function. That Lambda function can go get data from a database or Salesforce or some other system, bring it back into the contact flow. And now I could use that data in real time. So I can play dynamic prompts. I can decide how I want to route this contact. More importantly, I can even add essentially metadata to the contact so that as it gets to the agent desktop or whatever the agent is interacting with can do really interesting things. If you then think about some of the additional capability in other AWS services, for example, like Kendra, I can actually now start integrating Kendra from a developer perspective on the agent desktop to do things like take that real-time transcription, feed it to Kendra, and bring back some really interesting suggestions for
Yeah, one
agents.
thing I actually forgot about, I mentioned Comprehend before in the demo, but when you talk about sort of conditional routing, something like using Comprehend to detect key entities, you could conditionally route calls about certain products without having to have this like 28-step phone tree. You can simply just ask the user to describe why they're calling and then conditionally route that based on Transcribe and Comprehend. So a pretty slick sort of combination there.
Yeah, and you can actually
Yeah.
do that directly with Lex, right? So I can create a Lex chatbot, and I can create a really great conversational interface where I can ask you, what's the reason for your call today? I can understand the intents out of those utterances and either use that to create a fully self-service experience or use that to then decide how I want to route the contact.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, this is some really good stuff, and I think this is an area I feel like that has seen very rapid innovation. Can you kind of just give us a sense of how far we've come in this industry for contact center support? Because I feel like this is just stuff that it just started popping up overnight everywhere.
Yeah, when we first released Amazon Connect, there definitely was this momentum that was created around kind of reimagining your customer's experience, and really kind of creating better customer experiences in general. So when we launched Amazon Connect initially, we had Polly and Lex directly out of the box inside of Amazon Connect, and that was a thoughtful decision, right? The Amazon Connect service team could have went and said, hey, I'm going to build the same type of capability directly in Amazon Connect, or I can leverage other existing AWS services. And that's a common theme within AWS in general. The decision to leverage existing services allows us to innovate at a much faster pace. So now the Amazon Connect team can focus on creating the best value out of Amazon Connect, while the Poly team or the Lex team or Transcribe team is focusing on their specific services. And as their services continue to improve and iterate and mature, you just get that awesomeness directly within Amazon Connect. I'll give you an example. So Polly is one of those services that synthesizes text into speech, right? It's one of our AI services. Polly is automatically included within Amazon Connect. You don't really have to know anything about it. But recently, Polly just launched what's called the NTTS engine, so neural text to speech. Think of it as like the next gen way of synthesizing text into speech. What's really cool about that capability is it creates voices that are much more human-like. And one of the other innovations that they did was introduce something called speaking styles or voice styles. So now I have stuff like newscaster. So I can actually set a set of text and have it be read back in real time as if I was a newscaster. More importantly, for the contact center space, they just released something called conversational voice styles. So essentially what it does is, rather than reading in a monotone way, when you enable the conversational voice style, with machine learning and AI, it automatically understands where it should have inflections, pauses, and so forth. So it sounds a lot more human-like. Well, the neat thing about that is when Polly introduced that, if you're an Amazon Connect customer, you were just able to kind of gain those benefits directly within your contact center space. That enables us to innovate at a much faster pace.
Speaking of being on top of other AWS services, any plans to integrate with Sumerian?
We don't tend to talk too about too many.
I think Rob and I are just worried we're
yeah.
going to be out of a
Yeah, you
job
don't have
when
to
Sumerian and Connect and all that comes together, and we don't have to host anymore. We just sit behind the keyboard, we type some responses.
Yeah, get customer experience and our customer support.
No, but all jokes aside, it's really cool to see that when you invest in a service, this is something that I talk about with the AI services. You don't just invest in the model the day at launch; it will iteratively be improved. But when we think about some of the dog fooding that happens with the services at AWS, the sort of, like, I wouldn't call them network effects, but the compounding effects are significant, right? So as a Connect customer, you get to tap into the benefits of all the advancements on each of those underlying AI service teams, and they're all bundled in automatically. You don't have to upgrade to a new version. They're typically just going to work out of the box without you needing to worry about them.
Yeah, and that's one of the really exciting things about our continuous deployment model, is that there's no version of Amazon Connect. So it's not like, hey, I'm on version 1 or version 1.5. We're deploying all the time. So we're always iterating and improving our service. Again, like I said, with the example of Lex and Polly, you're automatically just benefiting from that.
So with like, Connect is almost a customer of these other services internally in a way, and so obviously that's a two-way street. Is feedback from what your customers are looking for, does that ever get passed on to the teams where you almost act like a customer in the same way they would externally and ask for certain features?
Yeah, 100%, and that's actually really exciting. It's exciting both for us as people that kind of work with the Amazon Connect space, but it's really exciting for those service owners as well, right? They love the feedback. So our Amazon Connect customers, as they use Polly and Lex and some of these other capabilities, those other service teams, come to us and ask for that feedback directly from our customers, because it's just another use case that probably when they first created that service couldn't have imagined that would have been a use case for their service, since things like Polly and Lex came before Amazon Connect, and that's super exciting.
speaking of relying on all these other services, does that make the customer's bill really complicated?
No, that's actually the really cool thing about this is that from a customer perspective, when you subscribe for Amazon Connect, you pay for the connected minutes from an Amazon Connect perspective and the telecom minutes, right? So it's really just two line items. Now that we've added contact lens is an additional line item, but just for contact lens holistically, not for all the capabilities of contact lens, which again is pretty awesome. And you'll see why as we kind of go through and talk about the different capabilities of contact lens.
Wait a minute, I think I got you. So that means if I go and build all these different services and hook them together from scratch, then I can save myself money.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about, I mean, so there's when you look at things like Lex, for example, right? They're still paying for the Lex service itself, but things like, for example, Poly is just included natively directly within Amazon Connect. So the connected minute price that you're paying for includes the Poly service. With Lex, it's a hybrid. So with Lex, you'll get billed for the Lex usage because it is consumption based, but you don't have to worry about any of the integrations or how to make it all work together. You just select that chatbot from a drop down. For contact lens, even though it's powered by things like comprehend and transcribe and all these other capabilities, you just see the one line item for contact lens.
Love it. Simplified pricing, I think, is a huge distinguishing feature for me.
Yeah, and it's not just simplified. If you look at contact lens, right? If you were to combine all the different services needed to deliver something like contact lens, and you were to add all that consumption together, it would actually be more expensive than the per minute rate of just contact lens. So not only are you saving money if you were to kind of stitch these services together, but you're saving even more money because nobody has to maintain it or do all the operational aspects of that and troubleshoot things and worry about the pipelines between these different services. That's all done for you as a managed service directly by the Amazon Connect product in contact lens.
Well, I think what you said there is very important, and I want to play it back to you, make sure I heard it right. If I opt to not use Amazon Connect and I string together all these different AI and ML services to rebuild all that functionality, in addition to all the time that I spend building and maintaining that, I'm actually paying more just for the raw usage of the services.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that as we kind of continue to iterate and add this value inside of Amazon Connect, that not only are we adding value from a business and an operational perspective, but that we're also adding value from a financial perspective. Customers love the idea that they can save a lot of money by using Amazon Connect.
I mean, that's pretty mind-boggling to me, right? And for one main reason, and that's that a lot of the AI, well, I think all of the AI services, well, I don't want to say all, but I think nearly all of them, at least the ones we've spoken about today, are consumption based already. So a lot of the optimizations you're not doing are not just intelligently like turning on and off instances or some of these other sort of housekeeping things. They are quite literally saying, or the value proposition is quite literally, for the same amount of consumption, you are paying more because you have gone and internalized that. And I feel like you phrased it a little meekly, right? You were like, we want to deliver financial value. It's like, well, I don't think I'd ever say no to someone saying, I will give you this value for just less money, right? That's I think that's a no-brainer for everybody. So I know we just spent a lot of time sort of reiterating on that, but like, oftentimes this if I were to think about how folks would probably do this previous to contact lens, right? There's sort of the build it yourself route, but the trade-off of maybe having a little more customizability is dwarfed by the fact that you could save money by even stringing these services together, or you save money from the alternative by just using contact lens. Like that, it just becomes such an obvious choice to me.
Yeah, well, we didn't actually get rid of that customizability. So for example, you can still use things like custom language models and so forth to further tune the capability. But more importantly, we're giving our customers a way to have their cake and eat it too. So with contact lens, you get this UI where you can actually consume all the insights and see the transcripts and the sentiment analysis and so forth. But we also know that businesses have different needs and they like thinking creatively about solving different problems. So not only are we going to give you a way to consume this data in the Amazon Connect application, we will also export a JSON file in your S3 bucket with all the raw data. So you get the transcripts, you get the timestamps, you get the comprehend data, you get essentially all of our analytics in a JSON file where we've done the undifferentiated heavy lifting. And now you could take that data and add on to it and do anything interesting that you might want to do, whether it's tying it to other business data you might have, whether it's giving it to your analysts and scientists and having them build their own machine learning model on top of that data. So you get both. You get the ease of use directly within the product, but you haven't lost on the flexibility.
Well, here I am. I'm a filthy liar posing false dichotomies here, but so much exciting stuff here. I know we keep talking about the fact that you can use a single tool and it makes it much easier. Hopefully this is no surprise to you, but I think many people in the audience would like to see a demo. Do you think that would be possible today, Yasser?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me do this. Let me kind of, I'll go over 2 slides really quickly, just maybe 2 minutes, and then I'll go right into the product and give you a tour. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
A tour. That's a new phrasing. I've never heard that one before. A cloud tour. We call them demos on this show, but this is we're always trying to expand our horizons.
All right. So when we created Contact Lens, these are some of the challenges that were faced by contact center customers. So essentially, poor visibility of their customer care. So it was hard for businesses to understand the experiences that their customers are having in the contact center space. There's also things like compliance risk. So for example, if somebody, saying their social security number or some sort of sensitive information, and do I need to be able to kind of redact that or deal with that? Or for example, are agents putting the right disclosures in place when they're talking to customers or greeting customers the right way and so forth. Another issue and challenge that businesses have is a timely discovery of emerging issues. So if you think about the idea that, if you're talking to a customer and they're complaining about something and you have lots of customers maybe complaining about the same thing, in today's world, it might take days, weeks, or in some cases months before the right business analyst or the right person in that business understands that there's this trend or this issue. And by the time they react, either that issue is gone or it's no longer relevant or there's a more pressing issue. So the idea of being able to use machine learning to surface these issues either in real time or near real time is differentiating. And that's something that businesses have been looking for. And then the lack of real-time support for live calls. So think about the experience where you might be on the phone with an agent and you're having a poor experience, right? Either they're not solving your problem or they're, name the issue. Rather than waiting until that customer has gotten off the phone and probably tweeted about this issue or put something on social media. What if you had the capability of surfacing these issues in real time so that supervisors can chime in on that conversation and help that agent deal with this problem before the customer disconnects and has a poor experience? And that's something that we're going to be bringing soon to Contact Lens as well. And then finally, I'll kind of go through quickly on these last 3 items. The disconnected ecosystem of product essentially is referencing the capability where if you want to do speech analytics today, a lot of times businesses will use integrations, so third-party tools to provide this capability. And then they have to worry about either licensing or how do they buy it, how do they integrate it within their contact center. So that disconnected, disjointed experience was also a challenge. And then I kind of already talked about the third-party tools. And then the transcription accuracy. This is huge, right? Because a lot of these insights come off of the transcription, right? So it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, right? You need really good transcription to then be able to kind of derive and get all these other insights. And that's something that we're really good at, not just out of the box, but we also provide businesses a way where they can use custom language models or kind of custom vocabulary so that we can make our transcription more accurate for that specific business or their vertical or key things that they use in their business that might not be generic terms.
One thing I just wanted to say that I noticed here is, and I know this is Connect rather is different than a lot of AWS services for a lot of reasons. But when I think about the challenges that the customers face here and that you have on the slide, especially in the former half, it's not simply a technical challenge or simply a domain like a logic problem. It is the unique combination of the two. Again, you could have the best analysis in the world, but if you don't actually get the right transcription on the way in on that technical problem, you have no path to value. It's Connect really is marrying sort of an end-to-end solution that addresses these two quite different problem sets.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can really think of Connect as a SaaS-based application, right? It's no longer, it's not like a lot of the other AWS services that's infrastructure or something like that. You're really consuming an application, and it helps us kind of take care of the technical issues while giving you the business value and ways to solve these business problems, like you mentioned. So I'll quickly go into this next slide, which talks about what is in Contact Lens today and kind of what's coming, and then I'll go ahead and show you the product. So again, Contact Lens is a set of AI-powered, machine learning powered capability directly within the Amazon Connect service. And what that enables you to do and what's added with Contact Lens is an advanced search capability. So now I can say, show me all the calls where somebody has mentioned this keyword or this phrase. More importantly, I can say, show me the contacts where somebody's mentioned this keyword, but the customer specifically said it or the agent said it. I can even then get into detailed analytics and sentiment analysis and look for calls, for example, where the customer mentioned this phrase, but the sentiment of the call started poorly, but then ended at the call positively. So that helps me understand training opportunities or good examples of calls that I could then use to train other agents. One of the other really neat things is what we're calling the automated contact categorization. What that allows me to do is use a rule-based engine to build something like, hey, if these phrases happen or are said by either the customer or the agent in this part of the contact, then label it or tag it with this tag. So now I can drive consistency in how I'm dispositioning my calls or how I'm labeling my contacts, rather than relying on a human to say this call was about this, it was about that, and so forth. But it also lets me find things like compliance, where I can say, maybe I'm interested in understanding, did the agent greet the customer correctly? So I could say, okay, if you see these phrases in the first 30 seconds of the call mentioned by the agent, put this label on there and say, yep, the agent greeted this call correctly. Or the lack thereof. I can say if these phrases weren't said in the first 30 seconds, then label this contact. And we're going to continue iterating on the capability and different ways that you can create these categories. Now, that's more of like the known unknowns. So the things that I already know that are happening in my contact center that I want to look for. One of the things that I'm really excited about is theme detection. And the way you want to think about that is almost like the unknown unknowns. What are the things that are happening in my contact center that I didn't even know were happening? So I didn't even know to look for them. So one of the things coming soon to Contact Lens will be the ability to do that, essentially giving you theme detection, where we can kind of surface different thematic items across multiple contacts to let you know these are the things that are happening in your contact center across these different time ranges. So that's going to be super excited, and that's obviously powered by machine learning. And then the next thing that we're looking to release soon will be what we're calling Supervisor Assist, and that gets back to the idea of surfacing insights in real time. So that's going to be coming soon as well. And then finally, I talked about this earlier, but everything that we do tries to be open and flexible so that we can enable our customers and our partners to add additional value on top of these insights. And this is, again, different than a lot of other products in the market today. We're not interested in creating a walled garden where you have to come back to us to get your call recordings, your insights, and so forth. You paid for it. You should have the raw data so that you could then use it however you see fit. And that's something that we do with Contact Lens as well.
Yeah, I'd imagine us. Go ahead, Rob. Yeah.
I'm okay. There's so much here. I have so many questions, but I wonder if it would be better to just leave them after I see the demo.
All right, let's do it. Let's go through. Okay, so Can you see the screen here? Okay, cool. So this is the Amazon Connect portal. Essentially, this is like the application that you would go into as either an agent or contact center supervisor or what have you. The first thing you'll notice is this doesn't look like your normal AWS console, because it's not. There's actually a specific portal that we give access to so that you can consume the Amazon Connect service through this portal. And the reason for that is that we want it to be easy for agents or supervisors. They don't have to know anything about how the AWS console works and so forth. They log into this application directly. So let's kind of show a couple of things here. The first thing I want to show is how easy it is to enable this functionality.
So yeah, so just to quickly clarify, that also means that agents don't need an AWS account or an IAM account.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, so you can integrate, we do SAML is the ideal way that customers do this integration. So they can log in directly with their corporate credentials into this application. All right. So what I'm going to show you now is essentially the idea that we have for contact flows. And contact flows is essentially a visual representation of the experience you want to provide to your customer. So when you call up and you talk, maybe you call into a help desk or a helpline or to order tickets or what have you, that entire experience can be designed in a contact flow editor. So what I'm going to do here really quickly is just start creating one and kind of show you some of the cool things you can do here, specifically around Contact Lens. Before I get to Contact Lens, I just want to show you something really quickly. So here I have this canvas, and it's as easy as dragging and dropping these blocks onto this canvas to start creating an experience. And I just connect them over like little, puzzle pieces. So we talked about Poly earlier and how easy we make it for you to do text to speech. This is it. So I drag a play prompt block, and then in this play prompt block, I say I want to do text to speech, and I can say, hi, how can I help you? And then I click save, and that's it. This is as easy as it is for you to do text-to-speech in your contact center, fully powered by Poly. You don't have to know anything about Poly. You just put in text in a block, you hit save, and you're good to go. And then we make it also really easy for you to set different things for Poly. So for example, I can do something like set the voice. So here I can say, which voice do I want to read this back into using? So I can do things like, English, and we have all these different languages that you can use to read these prompts back in. And we have even different voices per language. So you can kind of create your own persona. And then finally, one of the cool things about what Poly has done recently is created brand voices. Essentially what that is, it enables businesses to work with the Poly team and create a voice that is unique to their business. Nobody else can get that voice. So if you don't want to have one of these voices because you want to have a very brand unique voice, you can do that. And that becomes a voice that you could use in your contact center or for anything else that you might want to synthesize into voice. So that's really cool. But this presentation is not about Poly. So let me get to the contact center, the contact lens part. So I talked about how easy it is to enable all these analytics in a checkbox way. So it's as easy as dragging the set recording and analytics behavior block. And I select the settings over here. I have a radio dial for turning on call recording because today Contact Lens works off of the call recordings. I could say I want to record my agent and customer, and then it's just a checkbox. So here I check a box that says enable Contact Lens for speech analytics. This is the configuration, right? So I've just configured this contact flow to be enabled for Contact Lens. I don't know anything about transcribe. I don't know anything about all these other things that I would normally have to know if I were to build this from that perspective. Now with Contact Lens, you can actually process more than one type of language. So we've enabled a number of languages for Contact Lens, and we'll continue to add more as the service grows. But one of the really neat things about Contact Lens is not only are we doing transcription and giving you insights and so forth, we also allow you to redact data, again, with a checkbox. So I check this box, and then I select how I want to actually get this data. And you have the option of getting redacted transcripts and also having the unredacted transcripts, getting redacted audio in addition to the original audio. And what I mean by that is it's one thing to give you a transcript and then automatically identify things like PII data and redact it, but we don't stop there. We will also go to the original audio file, split it out, take out the sensitive information, replace it with white noise, and then give you that audio file so you can actually get a redacted audio file in addition to the original audio file. And the reason that we don't just kind of chop it out and stitch it together is we want to have both the original and the redacted audio file have the same length, so it's easy for you to find things and so forth. Another really cool thing about how we redact data here is that, unlike traditional redaction options, our redaction engine is powered by machine learning. So we've actually created a model and we've trained it on thousands of samples of PII data, so it can automatically and intelligently look and find things like social security numbers, credit card numbers, names, and so forth, without you having to kind of create a formula or regex or anything like that. And as we continue to add to that model and improve it, you'll just get that benefit as well. So that's essentially how you enable Contact Lens. All right. One of the other things I want to show really quickly is the rules engine that I talked about earlier. So here I can actually go in and I can say I want to create a set of rules. So maybe I want to do something like understanding the context where the agent correctly introduced themselves or welcome the customer. So here I can say, show me for these key phrases or for these phrases, and it's easy for me to add more of these. So if the following words or phrases were mentioned or were not mentioned during the first, last, or entire part of a contact, and here I can define for how long to look for, in seconds, minutes, or hours. Hopefully you're not having hour-long conversations, but you never know. And for where the speaker is either the agent, the customer, or either. So I can create these rules and then automatically label these contacts. I can also create complex rules by adding multiple sets of phrases and kind of identifiers here. So you can get really, really, really fancy with this. Now, this is again more when you know what you're looking for. And then the next version of this will be things like theme detection. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I am still sort of trying to wrap my head around the concept that I can, in one button on the contact flow, enable this and then come in here and just have all of this routing. Like, I guess I'm just not used to working with services that are just this deeply integrated into the problem space that they're working with, right? It's like it's one thing to build a tool that is helping you give the building blocks, and then there's a lot of common ideas of what you could build with it. It's another thing to just like have a bunch of these buttons that I can, or these like multi-option choices that I can select and basically have what is an entire end-to-end application delivered and managed on my behalf. Like I guess I'm just still a little mind blown at that concept, because I mean, again, it's very different from other AWS services. And I'm just almost struggling to find other things that, like, if I were to go into the call center business tomorrow, right, I'd be like, oh, Connect is just awesome, and Contact Lens just is mind-boggling. Sorry, you can continue. I know I'm derailing conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like I've kind of ran into this excitement over the last couple of years, because you're right, it's different, right? This is different than a lot of the other AWS services. And what's really cool about that is it's driven by a customer's ask and desire for it to have something like this. And it's even forced us internally to figure out, how do we work together to do this? Because this isn't something that, culturally we're used to doing at AWS. So it's awesome. It's driving change internally. It's delivering value to our customers. It's really an exciting time to kind of be in this space.
Yeah, sir. I'm especially enamored with the PII redaction feature.
All right, so let's get that going and show you guys how that works.
I'm just sitting here sweating, thinking about what an annoying problem that would be if I had to solve that myself. If I were sitting there looking at an S3 bucket with millions of audio files, and I have to write something to go in and redact that and replace PI with white noise. Oh my God, what an annoying problem.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our customers actually did that. And it was a really clever solution where they took that audio file and they parsed it through, a Lambda function, and they used, some application to identify the agent would click a button on their agent desktop when they heard, sensitive information. They would use those timestamps to go back and cut the file up. So absolutely, this is something that businesses we're trying to really figure out how to do, and now we're just making it that much easier for you. All right. So let me kind of show you how you get at this data. So today in Amazon Connect, I can click on Contact Search. And this is our search UI for kind of understanding and finding different contacts within Amazon Connect. So what I'll do is I'll go back to, I know that there's a contact here around this time that I'll use as an example. So I'm going to create a little search query here. And what I'm going to say is that I'm going to look for contacts where somebody mentioned late ride. So we have a demo in our environment that's like a ride service demo. You can call in and so forth. I won't belabor that. But anyway, so here I can say, okay, match all these words. And I'm only interested in contacts where the customer mentioned that there was a late ride, that they called in to complain about a late ride. But more importantly, I want to look for calls where the sentiment started. Actually, let me tell you a little bit more about this. So for our sentiment analysis, we've kind of normalized these scores instead of percentages to give you from a -5 to a +5. So if it's -5, it's really negative. If it's +5, it's really positive, and everything in between. So here what I'm saying is, show me a contact where it started less than 0 and ended more than 0. So I'm looking for calls that started negatively and ended positively, where the customer also mentioned late ride. So let's go ahead and do a search here. All right, so I have 2 contacts. And what you'll see is I can click on one of these contacts. And what you'll notice here is that this is kind of the details of this contact. So here I see all sorts of interesting information about the contact. I can see a graphical representation of the sentiment over time. So I could see it started really poorly. So this person was obviously upset. Hopefully the agent did the right thing and they ended on a positive note. And then I can also see things like neutral, positive, and negative customer sentiment and how much of this call was negative or positive or neutral. But then I can also see things like non-talk time. So I could see, how much time did the agent spend talking? How much time did the customer spend talking? And how much time was there just silence? And we know that these are indicators of customer experiences. So if there's a really long amount of silence, you might figure out, okay, maybe this agent needs to be trained. Maybe it's taking them a while to look up something or what have you. I think my video just froze. Okay, cool. All right. Then there's the area here where you can see categories. So this is where I could see that, back to that rules engine that I was talking about. So these are the labels that we automatically labeled this contact with. So I could see that there was agent conclusion, agent intro, and oh, by the way, there was an actual ride issue on this contact, which makes sense because I'm looking for a late ride. And then we created this new graphical interface for showing customers the actual audio. And this is new with Contact Lens. So this was not there before. It was a much simpler audio player. This is really exciting because here right off the bat, just by looking at this audio player, I can see where there's negative sentiment, it'll be red, where there's positive sentiment, it'll be green. I can also see the amplitude of the call. So I can see where maybe somebody was talking loud and I can click here. So for example, if I click right here, it will automatically take me to that area of the transcript. So it automatically scrolls down, and you could see that this caller was clearly upset, and they were obviously speaking loud here. And this is obviously also the transcript. So let's see what this sounds like. Hopefully you guys can hear this.
Things happen. You guys run a business and I'm the customer, right? If you're gonna be late, just tell me. I can't just show up to a pitch when I want. That's not how it works. Does this happen often? Do I need to use a different service?
So here you can see the customer was obviously not in a great position. They were a little bit frustrated. And I was able to identify that by looking at the negative sentiment and the amplitude. But since you were asking about redaction, let's get to an area where there's some sensitive data here. So if I scroll down, you'll see right here where it says, so I see your ride was picked up from an address that's been automatically redacted. So this is automatically happening with machine learning. And I can actually click right here and get to that area of the audio just by clicking on this timestamp. And if I were to play this back, you could see that not only did we redact the transcript, but we also redacted the audio. Let's take a listen.
Right. So I see your 11:35 a.m. pickup from this morning. Is that the trip?
So you can see here, not only are we giving businesses the redaction in the transcript, we've also automatically taken that sensitive information out of the audio file. Now, what's neat about this is that, again, you get both if you want. So based on my security and my privileges inside of Amazon Connect, I can decide who sees and hears the redacted information versus the original information. So that's kind of cool. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about here really quickly is you see how this turn right here is underlined by the system. Well, this is kind of the beginnings of where we're getting to from a theme detection perspective. So this is using machine learning to automatically identify what the customer said that lets the business understand what the issue is that they're reporting. So out of all this text, right, out of all these back and forths between the customer and the agent, our machine learning model was able to identify that this is likely the area where the customer, where the issue is mentioned or stated by the customer. So that's kind of neat. So that issue detection is there, and this will also be exported in that JSON file. Now, as we get closer to our theme detection, we're going to be able to use this type of capability to then now surface up additional themes and so forth across many contacts.
Wait, you have to explain a little bit more here. This is incredible. How does this work? How do you highlight, or how do you determine what is the approximate issue?
Yeah, so this is where I was talking about earlier, where we're using things like transcribe and comprehend and so forth, but we've also added our own science on top of that to be able to provide this functionality, right? So this isn't something that you can get today from an internal AWS service. This is where, not only did we just stitch services together, we're innovating on top of these services to add this additional value. I can't really go into detail into how we do this, but it's
I was
machine
just gonna
learning
say,
magic.
like, we can make some assumptions about, like, let's assume the theme has to be present in the first few back and forths on the call, but that's clearly not always the case, right? For innumerable reasons. But like, we're sort of jumping from just processing the language and getting, let's say, like, first order explicit properties like the sentiment of a word, and now Contact Lens and Connect is able to sort of put all of these pieces together and make these like meta analyses, or like draw these like larger conclusions in like the natural language understanding space. Like, I know you said like the science team, but it is quite literally machine learning science work being done. This is more than just stitching together other existing fundamental services. This is novel research for this domain.
No, it's really exciting. So the teams have done just some amazing work. I get the benefit of just kind of showing off their work, right? But it's very cool. So I want to show one more piece, and then I'll kind of end the demo there. This is what I meant by you get this UI, right, where I can actually start ingesting and understanding and interacting with this data, right? But more importantly, if you have an interesting use case, or you want to get at this actual raw data to do something else interesting, or maybe you want to take all these transcripts and so forth and merge it with other data, or maybe you want to have your science team, just like ours, added additional value, take this data and add even additional value on top of that. We'll give you the entire raw, all the data in a JSON file that's well organized and has a nice schema for you to actually get all this raw data. So here I can see those labels I talked about are right here. And I could tell you kind of, where we derived that from, or where the match details are. We'll also see things like sentiment. So I get all the sentiment by both agent and customer. You'll see things like interruptions, which you actually don't even see in the UI today. So we're actually giving you even more data directly within this file. So if there were interruptions back and forth between the customer and the agent, you'll see that. You'll see things like talk speed. So how many average words per minute did the agent say? Average words per minute did the customer say? And this is pretty cool because I talk really fast, for example. If I was an agent, I'd be horrible because I shouldn't be talking this fast to a customer. So you can look and say, you know what, this guy's talking way too fast, and you could do training opportunities and so forth to get them to talk slower or what have you. Same thing with talk time, but more importantly, you get all the transcript that I showed you earlier in the UI directly in a programmatic way that you can consume this data. So here I could see that, the transcript, I could see that it's redacted. I can also see the timestamps of where the redaction was. So if I wanted to kind of, reconstruct this, I could, especially since I have access to the audio file. So so like I said, it's all right here in this JSON file. So I think this is really cool to give you both worlds, right? I can consume it as an easy application. Maybe I'm a small business and I'm excited to have this capability where small businesses have really never had access to this capability before. Or maybe I'm a really complex environment where I want to just grab this data and do something else interesting with it. And we do have customers doing that.
I have so much to say here. Like, I guess most recently, because going on the structure of the JSON, the data modeling that you just showed us, like we opened the segment with discussing that Connect is not just a tool for developers. As we saw here, you can be an agent, you can be a supervisor, you can have most roles in a contact center or a call center and not need to ever touch a line of code. And I would imagine a service like that, even if you proved me wrong, you said, hey, you don't have to trade off customizability, you can get access to their own underlying data too. But what you just showed us there was that, like, it's not just that the in-console service and the data sort of increment in with parity with one another. If one area, I mean, I guess the data would have to come first, but if the data modeling and what we can make available to customers sort of jumps ahead of the console experience, you're not going to wait for the console to catch up. You're going to make that data available to customers directly. And like, that is, I would have never guessed that, right? That is such a cool sort of novelty that, you will not wait until you can release the feature. You will release the data and let people build as quickly as possible on top of it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you saw here, right? Is we didn't get to the part of the UI where we were able to build in things like interruptions or talk speed, but because the data is there, why not expose that directly, in that JSON file, and we'll eventually get that in the UI as well.
Yeah, this is incredible. This is, man, I need to play with this as soon as I can. This is so cool. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. There's already, I know Nick knows what I'm doing, but there's all sorts of silly ideas popping around in my head now.
We have
right
a little
after
side bet
this,
going on over which of the two hosts interrupts each other more, and now we're gonna rig all the audio up to contact lens to
with proven. We'll settle that bet. With proven, we'll settle that bet.
But no, I mean, I know UIs can make tasks easier. That's something, there are better UIs, there are worse UIs. Just the level of effectiveness that the contact lens UI enables people to have, where if you were to build out the flows to access some of that data, right? I could transcribe the text, right? I could identify the key entities with comprehend. I could do A and B and C all the way down to Z individual features that AWS has services that can do much of that. But the ability to access all that data at a glance and do these comparisons so quickly on like the time scale as sort of the key indexing element, like it just enables people to be, I know this is the joke of like 10x developers, but like this I largely see as like, 10x contact center agents, 10x, like people trying to analyze this data. Like it just enables a level of efficiency that would be otherwise superhuman, right? Like that, at least me being naive to the contact center world, that's the way I perceive this.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, and that's why earlier, this is more than just stitching together AWS services, right? Like that's just where it starts. But as you can see, there's a lot of value that we've added on top of those services. But to your point, that's absolutely correct, right? Today, businesses will have quality analysts or what have you that have to pick some percentage of calls to go and manually look at, right? Well, now I can use machine learning and things like contact lens to take the same cycles that as a quality analyst would have invested, but point them in the right direction, get them to look at calls that actually would drive value or the right contacts that they should be looking at.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that occurs to me is, we've talked about a lot of features, and I know that Connect itself is already way beyond just stitching together AWS services, right? It's already got all these different, like you mentioned, the omni-channel support. It's got chat, it's got voice, it's got redirecting, it's got the interface you showed us where you can drag and drop the voice prompts and all that stuff. It just occurs to me that already, I mean, we're talking about a vast set of scenarios already covered by Connect itself. And then what we're talking about on top of that with this feature announcement is the really the bells and whistles, right? The cherry on top of the sentiment analysis, some of the AI, the demo that you showed us there, where we can find that issue of, like, in the transcript, pinpoint exactly where we think the customer issue was articulated. That to me is just, wow, that's incredible.
It's pretty cool, and we don't plan on stopping here.
That's a great segue into another question. I feel almost greedy asking you this, given how many features you've talked about, and especially new ones. But for anyone who's maybe already a Connect customer or folks that maybe get started, is there anything they can look forward to in the coming months with Connect that we can talk about publicly here?
I kind of covered that when I talked about theme detection and the supervisor support. That's about as much as I can talk about for those features, but those by themselves are going to be super differentiated and awesome. Now, the other interesting thing is that that's going to just come at the same price point of contact lens. So as we continue to iterate, we're not looking to nickel and dime our customers, right? We're looking to just continue to add additional value for within Amazon Connect and that portfolio in general.
So with a service like this, you mentioned you've been working with customers. Do you have any customer stories that you can share? Any customer references of folks using Connect out in the wild?
Yeah, we have lots of customers using Amazon Connect. So we have thousands of customers that are using Amazon Connect today. And you can go to our website and see all of our referenceable customers. We have customers like Intuit, customers like Capital One, Accolade. We have lots of customers that are using a product. I don't have the referenceable ones memorized, so I got to be careful not to mention a customer that's not referenceable. But we do have a website where you can actually go and see testimonials and customer references right on our website.
And with customers like that, at the top of the broadcast, Rob and I were talking a little bit about the value of this show and making it more broadly known, some of the things that we launch and why we're excited about them. And I think when we talk about a product and features like this with Contact Lens and Connect, it is, even if you don't run a contact center yourself or you're looking to implement this feature, odds are you probably are maybe a customer of one of those businesses, and you may have jumped on a call, and that entire flow may have been managed and analyzed through something like Contact Lens and Connect, and you would have never known it, right? So it's really interesting here how these launches can affect us even if we don't use them ourselves. So very exciting. So for folks that are looking to get started, you mentioned sort of the different type of console folks would use with Connect, but are there any resources we could point the audience to get started with Contact Lens?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, right on our website, so aws.amazon.com/connect. You can actually see all of the different capabilities, and you can sign up and try the service. Amazon Connect actually has a free tier, so you can get started and for free. I think you get like 60 minutes a month for the first year. So you can actually start creating interesting experiences and playing around with it for free.
So Rob and I can run this entire guest segment each month through Contact Lens for free. That's great to know. Awesome. We will get a link to any of those documents thrown in chat, so for anyone watching at home, they can follow up through that. But without we're at almost an hour on this demo, but I feel like we could go for so much longer. There's just so much to show off and connect. Contact Lens, I think Rob put it very aptly, is very much the cherry on top, but it's also the whipped cream. It's the sprinkles. It's a lot more than that. So Yasser, thank you so much for taking the time and for joining us on the show today. And when we come out with some of those new features that you hinted at before, hopefully we can have you back on the show.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love that. This was my first time on the show and really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Yasser. Incredible work from you and the team.
Thank you.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment with another demo, so hang tight. We'll see you in just a second. All right, folks, we are back with our second and final demo of the day. I know we spilled the beans a little bit before, saying that we would be having an AI service demo here on the tail end, and that demo is Amazon Fraud Detector. Very excited to show this off. I've gotten to see a sneak peek of the demo that we'll see in this broadcast. But before we get into that, Nick Tostenrud joining us from the Amazon Fraud Detector team. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks.
Awesome. So, let's set the stage a little for folks that are new to Fraud Detector. Again, it's newly generally available, so I think it might be new to most folks that are watching. What is Amazon Fraud Detector?
So Amazon Fraud Detector is a new AI service that we launched that is a fully managed service to help customers deploy world-class fraud detection ML models to use to detect fraud in real time at scale. We're really with the service we've focused on kind of, I think, as you mentioned earlier in the show, a lot of services are trying to take on that heavy lifting, the undifferentiated heavy lifting of customers, so they can focus on particular problems. With Fraud Detector, what we're trying to do is automate that model building process as much as possible, and everything we do with the service is working towards building customized models based on the individual customer's unique fraud challenges to optimize accuracy of the models.
Now, when you say fraud detection, can you give us a couple of examples of what you mean?
Yeah, so we are typically focused on common types of online fraud. So think of like a new account creation or account registration where somebody's using like stolen identity information or fake information and trying to create a bunch of accounts to go scale some type of fraud attack, or a card not present transaction that's using a stolen credit card that may result in a chargeback for the merchant. And then there's kind of a whole host of different types of abuse scenarios, from like promo code abuse to like loyalty point redemptions that are used to shift points to somebody who shouldn't have them, that type of thing.
Awesome. The gears are turning in my head for some of the customers or folks that would be very interested in this service. But let's talk a little bit about where something like Fraud Detector fits into the broad scheme of AI and machine learning on AWS, because I know anyone who's probably tried to explore it knows that there's this thing called SageMaker that's out there. There's all these other AI services, and they all sort of come in at different levels of abstraction. And I know the word AI service is something that means of something very particular to us here at AWS. So do you want to talk a little bit about sort of AI service, Fraud Detector as an AI service, and where that slots in, and what the abstraction is for folks to have to bring to the table and what they get out?
Yep. Absolutely. So as you mentioned, there's a few layers to the ML offering in AWS. That middle layer is really built around SageMaker, and it's targeted at more engineers, ML engineers, data scientists who want kind of full control over building out their ML models and managing those. Then if you go up the stack to the AI services, these are kind of what we mentioned as fully managed services. So the idea in particular for Fraud Detector is that somebody who is not an ML expert, somebody who's not an engineer, can come in and build a world-class fraud detection model without having to have that background and that expertise.
Yeah. This is something that's very interesting to me. I know I'm harping again on the AI soapbox over here, but when I think about the AI services at AWS, a lot of them have pre-built models. Some of the earliest ones were always like, hey, here's a generalizable model that will work for X problem. Examples of this being things like comprehend to try and understand sentiment in text, things like recognition to do object detection in entities that exist out in the world, right? But when we think about something like fraud takes many different forms and is one of those problems that's kind of intrinsic to your data, right? Like fraud, every company, every domain, and so on, has its own nuances to that fraud. And so when I hear this and you say, folks can easily bring their data and train their own model and it's all fully managed, this makes me think a lot about some of the services like Personalize and Forecast. And this is definitely not AWS official terminology here, but I almost think of those as like the tier 1.5 between the fully managed, sort of pre-built model and SageMaker, where you provide your own data, but it still offers all of that tier 1 value of handling all the infrastructure and handling all of the ops work around that. And so, pointing specifically to like personalize and forecast where you bring your own data, is that sort of what folks can expect from Fraud Detector here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. In our experience, fighting fraud across Amazon, all the research we did leading up to this product, pointed towards customized models as the best approach to get the results. And so what we're really trying to do is optimize model performance, and that has a bunch of benefits in a fraud system and for a fraud team. It helps with scale. It allows you to reduce the noise in terms of the types of events that get alerted that require a human to go investigate. So the accuracy is important to the point where that's where we have focused and making things custom. So and bringing in customers' historical data, training a model that's predominantly based on that data to learn patterns of fraud in that data, and making that entire process easy to do with an output that's easy to understand for customers.
So let me play some of that back to you and then ask a question if it still makes sense. You're saying that the model that we run out of the box is trained on our own experience with detecting fraudulent transactions and some of our own data. Is that correct?
Not quite. So with Fraud Detector, there's not an out-of-the-box model per se. So I would call that a generic model, and that's really what we're trying to avoid. Not avoid, but like I said, in our research, it's not the ideal way to maximize performance and accuracy of fraud detection. So we literally start from scratch with the customer's historical event data to train that model. Now we do some things to enrich that data and transfer some of the learning from fraud patterns we've seen across Amazon, and add some additional data to make the feature engineering process a little more sophisticated. But it all does start with the customer's data, and there's not an out-of-the-box like generic model, so to speak, that we build from.
Got it. Thanks for clearing that up. So that's what you were referring to, Nick, when you were saying this is kind of this tier 1.5 where you have to bring your data, but it is still kind of turnkey.
Yeah,
once
and
you
forecast
have that,
and
right?
forecast and personalize behave in that same way, right? So let's take personalize, for example, right? If my business is in suggesting movies or TV shows to my users, well, there's no perfect or highly accurate generalizable but also specific model off the shelf. So I, as a personalized user, would sort of bring my own data, and then I can select the recipes, is what they're called, and personalize, and I can have it handle training, deploying, and then serving requests to that model. And I think we'll see that in the second half of this session. I know Nick has an exciting demo to show us there. But again, stage setting just a little bit before we go deeper on some of the semantics here in Fraud Detector. Fraud, obviously, I think the first thing folks think of is lost revenue or lost money. Nick, you pointed to merchant fees and so on. But when I think about fraud, even at just like a personal level, there's so many other forms of damage that occur, right? There's the frustration of having to just deal with this. So there's the poor experience for the company, the poor experience for the the credit card company. There could be the poor experience for the end user. There's lots of other things too, like damage to your brand, right? You want to be able to stop fraud sort of at the root. And I think you hinted earlier that, or directly said that we've had to handle fraud for a very long time here at Amazon.com. So can you talk a little bit about that story? Because I'd imagine there's some sort of link between how we started handling fraud and how a service like Fraud Detector becomes available today.
Yes, absolutely. We've been battling fraud across a couple decades now. The Amazon Fraud Detector service is actually built out by the same team builds the fraud systems and fraud detection ML models that protect AWS from various types of we've really taken that experience, the research over the experience building out the experience building out the systems, tried to build that into the product in a way that gives access gives access to these techniques to fraud teams that might not have to build them on their own, the resources to build them on their own. And stepping back a little bit, similar to other. I think the story earlier in the show. had customers asking us, if there's anything AWS could do to help them get better. That caused us to kind of look internally and say, we've actually been doing this quite a long time. We've developed some strategies around thinking about strategies around thinking about detection throughout an account life cycle versus kind of bringing that to the front door, like bringing that to the front, like through prevention, stopping that bad actor from even damage, and then causing other types of containment, other types of containment remediation strategies, through that journey, and all that research, we've really zeroed in on what I call an ML first approach to fraud detection. Over the years, we found centering our approach around ML, scale everything much better, detection, move that closer to detection, kind of true prevention, the front door, and detect those bad actors before they really get into the systems and get into the systems and have a huge blast radius with their actions. And so as we went through the working backwards process, it led us down the direction of leveraging all that experience to focus building this aspect of this ML detection system.
Yeah, you mentioned that making the decision to use ML as sort of the core logic engine of how you would detect fraud was a significant improvement. What is the alternative here? Am I imagining a set of like nested if statements that just end up as a logic tree that say like yes, no? Like what is the alternative previous to ML where an algorithm can actually perform that learning?
Yeah, I think it's fairly typical to start out with some, a small set of business rules or logic rules that say, and if you've seen like these IPs before, these email domains before, then do something kind of harsh, block it or investigate it. And then over time, that small group of rules kind of grows into a more complex set of rule sets that have a lot of legacy information. So you get a little tentative about changing it because you don't know what will happen. You don't know why this rule was put there in the first place. And then at the same time, because that can sometimes grow organically, those get tied into the code. And so as a fraud operator, fraud analyst who is really like their job is to react to changing fraudster tactics and put in mitigations and kind of stop these outbreaks, they end up having dependencies on engineers to deploy a change to rule logic, and it just slows them down, right? And so like part of what we were trying to do, Fraud Detector, is really take all that fraud detection logic and put into what we call a detector, and just house that and enable fraud teams or whoever's operating the fraud system to tweak that on the fly and just be much more responsive as the fraudster is changing their tactics.
So one thing I'm wondering is, I know how to write if-else statements and and define a series of rules that checks for things like IP address or problematic domains or what have you. But what does the developer experience look like now that you're talking about this ML-driven model?
Yeah, so I can walk you through the experience here, and then I can demo it as well in a little bit. What we've tried to do is make the console experience, an AWS console for Fraud Detector, easy to use for a developer user all the way to a fraud analyst user, so that they can have success. Most of everything that you can do via the console, you can also do via the APIs. We'll focus on the console experience and the flow. So really to configure and build your model, there's a couple steps. First, you upload some historical event data to S3, and then Fraud Detector will pull in that historical training data set and run it through automated ML pipeline that we've built custom for fraud detection models. Like as I mentioned earlier, the ML experts, research scientists, engineers that build these systems internally are the same engineers that built this auto ML pipeline. As we pull in the data and we take it through the AutoML process, there's a few kind of key steps I'll point out. One, we do some initial validations to make sure that the training data set kind of meets the minimum requirements. We're looking at the minimum number of events, making sure it has examples of fraud in it. And then we do a series of data enrichments. And so this is where we leverage the deep learning models we've built on top of Amazon's data to extract fraud patterns that we've seen across Amazon businesses and kind of feed those into the model to help boost performance. And likewise, we have some additional data sets that we use to take like kind of very common things in fraud detection, taking like an IP address and getting geolocation information from it. It just expanding the set of variables so we can craft richer features for the model. So we do all that enrichment, and we feed it into a set of features that we've designed, build a bunch of models, do some kind of hyperparameter optimization, and output the best performing model. And that whole process is fully automated. And the output, as the developer, as the user, is to get that finished model that's trained with some performance metrics that we've computed based on the holdout data set. And from that, you can look at false positive rates and different kind of fraud capture rates at different operating ranges, and like validate that model is going to work for your use case and it meets your performance benchmark. And if that's the case, it's a one-click deployment. We spin up a model endpoint for that model, and here's where you typically will want to pair that model with some what we call threshold rules or some business logic. So each model has a risk score range of 0 to 1,000, and 1,000 being highest risk. And you, in a very kind of basic scenario, you'd write maybe 3 threshold rules that say anything above 900, you want to flag for a human to look at. If an event has a risk score kind of in the middle, you might want to step up and ask for some additional ID verification. And then anything below 500, just kind of pass. It's a legitimate customer. And so you write those business rules that interpret the model in what we call the detector. And it's like a container of all the detection logic, the models and rules that you want to evaluate a particular event against. And once you're happy with that logic, you publish that detector, and we have an API called Get Event Evaluation. And the system at that point is really designed to be a low latency risk evaluation. So you'd send a new incoming, say, account registration or transaction to fraud detector. We'd run it through your detection logic and return in 150 or so milliseconds any risk scores from the models, plus any outcomes from the overall detector logic. So then you could kind of adjust your customer experience kind of in real time accordingly.
But it's kind of nice that the output is not just a black box, but it has these knobs and dials that you can tweak.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more we can do in that space. One of the top feature requests we hear from customers right now is it's really interesting around model and score explainability. So right now, the level of explainability that we have is you could craft very granular threshold rules and really kind of understand where in that range of 0 to 1,000 you land. But the next level where we want to take it kind of takes that and gets to, hey, what are the driving factors of the event data that was supplied to fraud detector that is causing that score to increase?
Yeah, I know that was a lot of steps, and in just us talking as a bunch of heads, that could be hard to grok for a lot of folks. I think the visual demo will be make that a bit more clear for folks. But I wanted to touch on something that you said that really struck a chord with me, and it was the fact that these detectors can have conditional business logic built in. Now, all the way up at the front, we said that, like, hey, you shouldn't be defining your rules for fraud detection manually. That's inefficient and lots of other problems with that. But when we think about how we're handling the output, let's say, of our detector, that sort of becomes table stakes, right? Like, I would never want to implement a fraud detection mechanism by which I was just never had recourse, like regardless of confidence, just ban everything that's over a certain value. Like, the ability to have conditional routing of your events and the requests based on the confidence is extremely important, right? And it makes a ton of sense. This makes me think a lot of Amazon SageMaker. Is it part of Ground Truth? It is essentially a service that acts as an API proxy for a lot of the other AI services, such that you pass in your request to this proxy, and then depending on the confidence value of certain predictions, you can then route it accordingly. And this was like a longly requested feature for such a long time. But when we talk about the AI services,
like ML based fraud detection system, it's always going to be a balance. Like there is a place for logic rules that complement the ML models. And we've seen customers kind of that maybe are brand new to ML and they aren't quite comfortable, or maybe don't trust ML quite yet to abandon the rule-based system. And so they're using Fraud Detector today purely as a rules engine. And they're building out that same kind of rule logic, but they have a flexible interface that they can manage it. They can tweak it on the fly, publish new detectors. And they're looking towards like, okay, over time, we're going to incorporate the ML aspect of Fraud Detector. So there is certainly a place for rules depending on the fraud organization that's in.
One thing I was going to say is that, detecting fraud is a hard problem, and machine learning makes it much easier to generate accurate rules that do that. But the reality is that there's always going to be cases that are, you want holistic analysis on. And I think that, this bifurcation that we see at both ends is either you automate everything and everything goes through, your automated system and just automates a decision, or you do the fully manual route, which is I think how things probably were done way back when, where you have as much time needed from a human reviewer, but it's not efficient in a cost or time perspective at all. And so what this sort of rule-based logic on the detector enables you to do is basically say, okay, like, my level of comfort for a confidence threshold is, let's say, 90% and above, or 900 to 1,000 if that's the arbitrary unit that's used here. And then here's the range that I want a human reviewer to review. Maybe this is like the danger zone, or that's what you accept as your threshold. And then everything else is, let's say, non-fraudulent. And so it's sort of, you don't have to choose between one or the other. You can set that threshold for human review as wide or as narrow as you'd like, and otherwise you get to automate the rest. So it's a bit of a have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. And when we talk to fraud teams, like one of the large costs that fraud teams incur is really the human capital related to kind of scaling a group of human investigators to look at all these. And so you really kind of key in on what I call Q yield. So you want to make sure that anything that you're flagging for a human to look at is likely to be fraud. And so like if they're going to look at 10 transactions, 8 or 9 of those are actually going to turn out to be fraud, not 1 or 2. And so really kind of optimizing their time, as well as making sure that like you are trying to make more automated decisions, particularly on the legitimate accounts that they should never look at. And so that combination just really kind of reduces the human capital costs, as well as helps you scale when all of a sudden you have a spike of signups and they all look to be fraudulent, and just it brings down the scale of attacks with the model.
Speaking of something like a spike in downloads, I know you talked a little bit before about some of the other types of fraud that exist. I know you said sort of sheepishly that you may have had a demo. I don't want to hold you to it, but is there any way we could see maybe what it looks like to build a detector and to actually perform some predictions on events?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll share my screen here.
Cool.
Okay, so awesome. We're in the Fraud Detector console. And as I mentioned earlier, the first thing we're going to do is create an event, and it's essentially the schema for the event that you want to assess for fraud risk. So a common example I use is a new account registration. It could be a transaction. It could be a redemption of loyalty points. The system's built to be less prescriptive. You could, depending on your business, your use cases, you might be looking at like a payment instrument change in your settings or something like that. So it's very flexible. We're going to go and we'll look at a couple event types. I won't create an event from scratch here, but I'll kind of give you an idea of how you define an event, and then we'll go and build the model for it. Here's an example event, new account registration, full details. It has an associated entity type. So this is typically like who or what is triggering that event. In this case, it's the customer, creating a new account registration. And this is the entity event combination that we want to assess for fraud. This event has a series of variables associated with it. So think of this as information that the customer provides as part of the account registration, maybe passive data that the company collects behind the scenes. You wrap all that and you kind of up into the event definition. And then you have how you classify that event in terms of fraud. You might break fraud down into a couple different types. So you might have a label for fraud, a label for legitimate, and then for an account registration, maybe likely fraud. You haven't made a final decision on it. And so like where this plays in later is when we're going to build the model is essentially going to classify all of these registration events into one of these buckets. And so this kind of helps you define like what you're going to classify these events into. So when you have the event defined, then we can go into models, and we'll create a model here. Call it demo fraud model. And you select the model type. We have this model type that's going to look at, it can be used for new account fraud, online payment fraud, and a number of different abuse scenarios. And then you select the event that you want to build this model for, and we'll choose the one we just looked at, new account registration. At this point, we need to supply Fraud Detector with a historical event data set. To do this, you give Fraud Detector permission to access the file in S3, and then you supply training data set location. I'll flip over to Excel and show you the example training data set we're going to use. So here's a CSV of, I think, roughly 20,000 events. Each row would represent an account registration. And then we have a series of essentially the event schema in the headers with a couple additional fields, one for event timestamp and another for the label. So this row here, we've previously identified that this is a legitimate registration. And the model is going to use these fraud labels and these events to train and build a custom model for you. I want to hit on one thing here. Like this is a fairly simple example. We maybe have 6 or 7 variables tied to this event. You can get much more complex with Fraud Detector than this. The upper limit's 100 input variables, and they're kind of broken down into inputs that Fraud Detector recognizes. So these would be common fields that are used in fraud detection: IP address, kind of billing, shipping, email, user agent, and then there's custom input options. And so these are very powerful for companies who have use cases where they collect a piece of information that might they maybe have found was indicative of fraud in the past. So let's take a vacation rental website where they're taking reservations for bookings out. Like they might have found, or maybe they've crafted rules in the past around the time between when the vacation rental was booked and like the first stay, the night of the first stay. And that time is they found to be indicative of fraud. So with Fraud Detector, you could create a custom input and feed that additional information into the model, and the model will learn and pick up fraud patterns.
So while we're on the screen really quickly, I actually wanted to call something out and correct me and clarify what I don't cover here. But in a binary classification problem where you have 2 classes like legitimate and fraudulent, it is oftentimes significantly difficult to sort of take a data set that has extreme class imbalance, right? Like let's say that 99.9% of actual logins are legitimate and only 0.01 or whatever are fraudulent. Like I know that sounds extreme, but that may be common for certain traffic patterns, right? So you said that Fraud Detector does data enrichment, right? So if I passed in my data sort of as it comes in naturally in that form, Fraud Detector would have no problem, right? I wouldn't need to do any pre-processing or enrichment myself.
That's correct. So as part of the AutoML process, what we're doing is, well, first of all, I should say we recommend making sure your data set is matured in the sense that you're confident in your labels. So typically that could be a couple days to up to a couple months lag before you really have confidence in your labels. So you do want a mature data set to start with, but let's say you supply Fraud Detector with 6 months worth of events, and you have just a very few examples of fraud there. What Fraud Detector will do is, depending on the shape of that data set, and look at the timestamps and the ratios, and try different sampling techniques as part of the AutoML pipeline, based on the research that we've done, to make sure that we split up that data in a way that's going to lead to a successful model that performs. And so it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all sampling approach. It's very much dynamic and built into that. So we don't recommend that you provide a sample. Like, we recommend you provide the realistic balance between fraud and legit, and you don't have to do that type of pre-processing.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry, I derailed you a bit, but so yeah, we've got this comprehensive data set of, I think, was it 20,000 user login events that are labeled, right? So how are we going to ingest this into, oh, well, there you go. You're beating me to it.
Yeah, so we I already put it into S3, and now we're just referencing that data set in S3. We'll go to the next step. And so what we've done on this step is pull in the headers from that file. And you have a chance to exclude some of the data if you'd like. If you want to maybe build a model on a subset of attributes, maybe you're playing around with, hey, what's the minimum amount of data I could send over to Fraud Detector? You could really focus in on maybe 2 elements. IP address, email address tend to be very powerful and for fraud use cases. So the minimum requirement here is that we have at least 2 variables that are associated with that event to train a model, in addition to timestamp and the label. So we'll just include all of the data from the file. We will set the classification based on the labels we've predefined. And this third step is simply to review our configuration, and we kick off the model training. So at this point, we have version 1.0 of our demo model, and it's in status training. And trainings take anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes up to a couple hours, depending on the size of the data set that you're training with. We'll fast forward a little bit here. We'll look at a training model and keep the flow going.
You mean to tell me you don't like watching your food cook in the oven? You don't just stare at it too?
I don't know how long this show is, but so we'll look at, let's try this one here. You'll see we have version 1.0 of this model, and it's in status ready to deploy. So let's drill in and look at some of the performance metrics. So what you'll see here is a score distribution chart that helps you understand like how well the model separated the 2 classes, and for a given threshold helps you quickly see the false positive rate and or how you split fraud and legitimate. So for example, at 850, you would have 80% of the fraud, 3% of legitimate. So you come over here to the confusion matrix and you get a little more information. So if you're okay with a false positive rate, like operating range of around 3%, you would use this threshold score of 850 and flag for review anything above 850. And if you did that based on the holdout data set that we kind of did the blind testing against as part of the model building process, you would capture 80% of fraud. And so the idea here is that the users can come in and get comfortable with like how well this model is expected to perform, and then really zero in on what their threshold scores would be based on the operating range that they're interested in using it at. And I think the key thing around the operating range is it really depends on the action that they are intending to take. Like if they're taking a more severe action, they probably want a false positive rate to be in the, let's say, 1% range. But if they're really just queuing things up for investigation, like they may be okay with a 10% false positive rate. And so it really depends on the business. So we don't, as Fraud Detector, we don't define what that threshold should be, and we're really not in the business of making that decision for customers. It's really their decision.
You know, Nick, on some of those talent shows they have on TV, right? You got the panel of judges, and then maybe there's like the golden buzzer or something when, you know, like you're blown away. I know maybe this is pretty common to you, but like I would have smashed the golden buzzer here when I saw this, you know, model performance visualization suite here, because, you know, I know you said, hey, AWS isn't the business of telling you what you should be comfortable with the respect to the threshold of fraud, but there is sort of this gap that I would wish where, you know, maybe there's a lot of work to be done on some of the other services that Fraud Detector does very, very well here, which is interpretation of the results of your model, right? Like you can see exactly like, okay, I could, you know, visualize in Python, you know, some like the confusion matrix over there. But if I am not a machine learning engineer, I have to teach myself what a confusion matrix is, how to write the code to visualize it, and then how to make sense of it, right? Like right here in the console, when we talk about AI services truly being able to be applicable to people that may not even be developers or machine learning engineers, I think this is like one of the gold standards of being able to do that, because it's not just about deploying the model and serving events and inferences. It is about actually making sure that people understand what their model is doing. And so, sorry if I know I'm on a bit of a soapbox here, but like this is really, really slick. And this is, again, just one of those things that anybody who has the model wants to be able to understand how it's behaving and to make sense of, you know, do I feel comfortable deploying this? Well, I could go and run all my own tests, or I can take a look at some of this data in here and it's visualized in a way that makes sense to me. So hats off to you. This is one of the most comprehensive, generally available AI services, especially on launch, that I have seen. So this is really good.
Thanks. To us, it feels like it's very much day one. We have a lot of exciting things on the horizon to just build on this, but I thank you. I do feel like it's a pretty solid starting point. Well, so let's say that you're happy with this model's performance and you want to start using it. So the next step here would be to go to Actions and click Deploy Model Version. And in about 5 minutes, that model is now ready to be used as part of your detector. And so we'll go to a detector now and just kind of dig a little deeper into this concept. As I mentioned earlier, detector, you can think of it as like a container of all the detection logic, models, and rules that you want to apply to a given event. Typically, it could be one or two models. It could only be rules or a combination of the two. I'll show an existing model, and we can dig deeper from there. So here's a new account, an existing detector, and dig deeper from there. Here's a new account fraud detector. We have a couple versions. Each version has a status. There can be one active detector at any given time. And this is the one that's when you send a new event to the API, like we will use the active detector by default. And I want to point this out because it's, at least internally, it's a valuable feature in the sense that this empowers a fraud operator, a fraud analyst, to make tweaks to their detection logic without making a code change. And so they really just have to manage which version of their detector is the active detector. And they don't have to go adjust the call being made and specify a different version. We tried to think about ways to empower that fraud operator more and reduce the dependency on other teams. We'll go into version 2, and you'll see that we have a tab for models and rules. We'll see in this detector version, we have one model. It's the registration fraud model, and it's active. And then we have a fairly simple set of threshold rules, a low risk, medium risk, and high risk threshold rule. And then they have corresponding expressions. So when the score of that model is less than 700, output a low risk pass outcome. And similarly, a review outcome and a verify customer outcome. So what the rules engine does as it's interpreting the model output, it'll run through these rules. There's a couple different ways you can set this up. It could, in this case, it makes sense to evaluate them sequentially. They're not overlapping rules, so you only always have one outcome. But in more complex scenarios, you might want to run through the rules engine or the rule set in a sequential priority order and kind of cut out after the first highest priority rule that matched. Or you might want to evaluate every rule in the entire rule set. And so there's settings in a detector that let you kind of flip between
So
a couple
I have a
different
really quick
modes.
question while we're here, because it ties into some of the conversation that's going on in Twitch chat, actually, from Techie Stories and Neo Shadow. So we had an answer in chat around the pricing for Fraud Detector, and there's three parts to my understanding. There is the training hours, the model hosting hours, and fraud predictions. So one thing that's very interesting that you just showed us or mentioned was, maybe you want to intelligently sort of arrange your rules, let's say, to determine how many of those rule sets or those rule checks have to happen to commit the fraud detection. So I'd imagine in a world where I have to do 3 rule checks on an event versus 1, that maybe the rule where I run or the event where I run through 3 rule checks would be more expensive. Is that the case? How does that third element, the pricing on that third element run?
So it's a per prediction price, and the prediction is at the detector level. So if you had a rule set in your detector that had 100 rules, and you were in that mode that we call all matched, and it's evaluating every one of them, and they all evaluated to true, that's still like one prediction. There's other things you could do to kind of optimize costs and stagger different detectors in a flow. So let's say you wanted to weed out some really obvious, bad events based on like a list of what we call a negative table or like a block list of IP addresses. Like you could have a rule set based detector running through every event through that first, weeding it down to a subset that then you run the ML model through. Because that would be one way to take advantage. Like a rule only detector, the prediction price is slightly less than the ML based detector. So there's things you could do to optimize costs, but in general, like one prediction runs it through everything that is in that detector container.
Awesome.
So let's say we have our model and our rules configured as we like them. You can come into the console here and run a quick test. We'll just add some dummy information. Got my event timestamp, sorry about that. And so that just hits the Get Event Prediction API using the models and rule logic. The outcome is review with a corresponding model score of 769. And you'll find if you come into here, that would match the logic we have in place. And then if you were confident that you had the logic right and you wanted to start using this in production, you would come up here to Actions, hit Publish, and that would make this version of your detector the active version. And at that point, you could start sending new events. So I'm going to flip over here to a notebook where we have the Get Event Prediction API call. We're going to call this new account fraud detector with a unique event ID and some values for email address, IP address. We'll send that. And then you'll see here in the response, you get the information that corresponds to the outcome. So you'll see that we used this particular model and the score was 933. And for the rules, we had a rule called high fraud risk, and that matched with the outcome of verified customer. So you can then take these responses and dynamically adjust the customer experience in a real-time flow. An example of this that we like to use as, this allows us to do things in AWS, like for the AWS account registration process. It's a multi-step process. With the information that we gather in the first step or two, we can run it through a similar model, get back a real-time score and outcome like this, and then tweak step 3 and 4 based on risk. So we might reduce the amount of verification options or increase the amount of verification options based on risk. And that enables us to, really the goal here is to reduce the friction for the trusted, the legitimate users, so that they have a more seamless experience through like a risk-based dynamic flow like that. And I'll just wrap the demo up here. There's one more piece that I want to show off. Say you've been sending events in for prediction for a while, you can come into search past predictions, and you can drill down and audit the detection logic for a given event. So we'll take one of these test events that we did through the console. You can come in and see the kind of metadata about the detector and the event, the exact like raw values from the event that fraud detector received, any models and rules that were applied, how they evaluated and their corresponding results. And then you can drill down one level further. And one thing I think is interesting here, this expression doesn't really do it justice, but in fraud, if sometimes you end up with some complex rules, as we talked about earlier, and understanding how that rule actually got executed with the values that were received for a particular event can be a bit of a challenge. So you could come in to here, look at the original expression and then the expression with all the values plugged in to really kind of deep dive into how a particular like rule outcome was arrived at. I think that wraps it up for the demo.
Very cool. Let me see. I'm just following in chat, seeing if there are any questions in here. Don't see any, chat. If you have any questions for Nick, try to get those in. I guess I have a question myself, and we don't have to end on this, but you know, if folks are trying to get started with fraud detector, I'm like asking the question that what you have on screen answers, but you know, this is the product page, right? What can users do here?
Yeah, so glad you asked. I think that probably the most valuable resource here, first of all, you can get a summary of the service, look at some of our customer references. But the place I'd like to call out here is the additional resources. This is points to a few of the blog posts that the team has written about how to implement fraud detector, how to evaluate model performance. There's a couple videos of past tech talks, but also links to the user guide that has sample data sets and like a get started walkthrough that you could kind of go through that fairly similar demo to what I gave on your own, as well as a link to our sample notebooks that contain a training data set profiler to help you understand the shape of your training data set, make sure that it's going to work well with fraud detector, as well as like an API exploration notebook as well. So yeah, I think that's probably the best place to start with fraud detector. The great part of it being generally available is you can go try it out today. There's a free trial that's 2 months long. And yeah, we're super excited and just really looking forward to continue to get voice of the customer feedback on and
yeah, it's wonderful. I'm getting teased by Twitch chat now because we've had some folks from the fraud detector team in chat being so diligent about answering the questions too quickly, and I've been too nice and not wanting to interrupt you, Nick. So I apologize, but there have been a lot of questions, but they have also so gracefully been answered in chat. So thank you to all the fraud detector teammates that are out there helping with that. But yeah, you know, like you said, Nick, if you're interested in fraud detector, I'm quite glad to see that the product page here, and we'll throw a link in chat, but it has everything you really need to get started. More information through the blogs, tech talks to sort of understand a little bit more of you know, how it'll work. But you know, even code samples, all available there with a Jupyter notebook. You can make those calls using the AWS SDK to hit the fraud detector events, to start your training your own detector. So really a one-stop shop for anyone who was impressed or interested in the demo that you showed us today. Awesome. Rob, anything else before we give Nick the boot here?
Yeah, well, first off, I just think it was a really good demo. I'm still kind of thinking through the different use cases where we can apply this, but this is all really good stuff. I think there's an interesting theme that these two demos have formed, which is that it's really showing what you know, it was a while ago when we kind of announced the way that we think about the different ML and AI services, and there's a lot there, but I think we're really coming to see the maturity of some of these AI services and what they can accomplish. With both these demos, we're really just the theme that stands out to me is just how deep they go into these specific domains where there's hard problems that would have taken a tremendous amount of time to solve.
Yeah, I harped on at the beginning around sort of the emergence of this almost like tier 1.5 classification for some of these AI services, and you know, the more I think about them, the more those are the services that, you know, or sorry, those are the services that tackle problems that we've faced at Amazon for you know, Nick, you said decades in the case of fraud detection, but you know, when I point to some of the other ones like personalization, you know, we've been trying to personalize recommendations for vending books way back in the day, and since then a lot of other things as well. Forecast, you know, being able to perform time series forecasting on things like how much inventory should I stock, or how much energy will I use, and so on. And now something that we have faced since literally day one, detecting fraud. You know, I'm curious what other potential services in sort of this space or range that may be coming in the future, but I know that is nothing that you will divulge, Nick, so I won't ask you that unfair question.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks a lot for having me on. And
yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Again, Nick Tostenrud, Senior Manager of Product over at Amazon Fraud Detector. Thank you again, Nick, for joining us. We will, in typical What's Next fashion, we will be back very quickly with our final closing segment. Rob and I are going to have a little fun and try to string together the services we talked about today. So stick around. We will be right back. All right, all smiles here at the tail end of episode 9 here at AWS What's Next. Man, Rob, you know, you said in the beginning we are back for the 9th episode, and that's it's quite a lot for me to imagine. Maybe we'll pop some champagne or throw some confetti at episode 10, but we still got to make it there. So let's recap. We saw 2 demos today. We talked about some exciting new launches. Where should we start here?
Yeah, well, I just think the theme, like I said on a couple minutes ago, this theme seems to be what kind of end value you can deliver, deep end value, when you assemble some of these AI and ML services. That's the theme that I detect.
Yeah, I mean, I was the happiest camper when I got to you know, say that we only had one AI service demo or one AI demo, and then it was actually 2. So I played the trick on all of you, but you know, we talk about like there's this I think overused expression, but it does have weight to it, that data is the new oil, right? Like the idea being that it can power lots of downstream functionality, and your ability to collect it and then transport and process it and build systems on top of it are very valuable. And machine learning in many ways is sort of that engine that allows you to drive insights from that data. So you know, we talked about 2 demos today. We saw first contact lens for Connect, and so when we think about the data involved there, that's an age-old problem, right? We have audio data. We have folks, let's say in the very base scenario, talking face-to-face to one another, right? And then, you know, we have call centers and folks calling in, and there's a lot of heavy lifting that Connect as a service does to make that easier. But then, you know, let's say you have this S3 bucket that collected, you know, hours and hours and hours of audio data. You still have to analyze all of that. And, you know, some of the AI services help with that, but contact lens truly helped to be sort of more than the sum of the parts, not just in the ridiculous fact that it is cheaper to use contact lens than if you were to build it yourself, but that like it just ties it away together in a way that like I could not think of an easier UX for me, whether I was trying to sling code or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, that really, as he was demoing, I was just thinking like every one of those features would take so long to build and to run and operate yourself. It's really kind of a wonder that they were able to reduce price on top.
Yeah,
of
I mean,
on top.
yeah, I mean, then after that we saw fraud detector, and you know, we can go back to contact lens. I'm jumping around a bit here, but we mentioned sort of in the Connect's or the contact lens demo how closely integrated their roadmap is, or the features that they deliver with the abilities that these AI services are delivering. And maybe I'm sort of putting the cart before the horse here when we talk about this, how we're going to string the 2 together. But when we talk about something like fraud detector, you know, I would imagine almost a scenario where fraud detector going generally available means that down the road there could be some crazy use case where there's like a built-in call blocking feature for people that could be fraudulent. I'm taking over the whole game and the analysis here at the same time, so you'll have to yell at me after.
Why don't we tell the audience what the game is,
sure.
and then
So
we can get into
we
it.
play this little game here at AWS What's Next. We're developers ourselves. We string applications together all the time, and when we see exciting demos like this, we always wonder what we can build with it, and we get excited about going hands on keyboard to do that ourselves. So we like to play this little game here where we imagine that in a given episode from the launches that we spoke about and saw in that episode, if you were almost on the show like MasterChef, and these launches were the ingredients you had to put together, a delicious dinner, or in our case, an exciting or impactful application, what would that be? And so most weeks we have 3 launches, so it becomes a little bit of a, chaining together. But this week we have 2. Again, so contact lens for Amazon Connect, so a fully integrated, deeply featured data analytics portal and platform within your fully managed contact center, so you can transcribe your data, you can translate it, you can understand the sentiment at different points in the call, you can automate redaction of PII, anything you can imagine from deriving insights from that data, contact lens makes possible. And then second, we saw Amazon Fraud Detector, a newly generally available managed AI service to train your own detector for fraud, something like maybe account signups, loyalty points, and various others like credit, like purchases, for example. And you can simply pass in events and have business logic wrapped in by which your systems will make decisions based on the confidence threshold that system is fraudulent, that event is fraudulent or legitimate. So, maybe I'm cheating here, and I'm just gonna ask my answer here is gonna be the Connect team is the one that's the most happy here, because with Fraud Detector going GA, they could try to build in this imagine if you were doing like a denial of service attack on a call center or at a company, right? You'd want to mitigate that so that you can make sure that you're actually able to connect to the customers that have valid queries. My cop-out answer here, if you want to call it that, would be to have Fraud Detector put into Connect or Contact Lens and be able to preemptively block calls to your contact center that could be deemed fraudulent. I think that would be really, really cool. But maybe someone will build that, or maybe Yasser will build it and then convince the Connect team to actually edit it in.
I wouldn't be surprised if Yasser ended up building that.
Yeah, we spoke before.
Demo-driven development.
Yeah. I mean, to recap, I guess, because we're referring to a little bit of a joke that we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, and not everyone may have been here then. What made Contact Lens so exciting to us, beyond some of the stuff that I spoke about before, was the fact that, a lot of this functionality was possible to have been built before Contact Lens. You could take these various AWS AI services and transcribe the text. You could perform a translation. You could do sentiment analysis. You could then extract key entities, and then you could build a full custom application yourself to tie these together in a way that you would want. But Contact Lens does that automatically. Yasser actually, before Contact Lens ever existed, built this exact demo to demonstrate for customers how this could be possible with Connect and AI services. And that, in addition to customer feedback, ended up leading to Contact Lens in what we saw today. So I would be remiss to assume otherwise, that Yasser would not go and grab Fraud Detector and build a demo on that. But I think even beyond expecting Yasser to do that, I think that's something that all the folks at home actually probably could do, right? I'm thinking about some of the data labels or the categories there, and we're thinking things like area code, maybe time of day, like whether they have a registered user as a binary factor there, and you could very quickly start building a fraud detector for fraudulent or denial of service call attacks. That'd be really cool.
I think so. I see Nemo6 says, I already have an idea to use Fraud Detector for gambling. Well, if you want to share the idea, we'd love to hear it.
That's super interesting. It's like trying to see if a player is behaving with like imperfect information or something. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think if I were to assemble these two services, I might take the opposite route of what you took, where I would say, I was interested in the the bar chart where we had the true positives and the false positives, and the four quadrants of what happens when you set the threshold to some value. And I think that is probably something that you need to experiment with to figure out what the right actual production value is. But as you experiment with it, what are you doing with the results? It's almost like for example, what if I set the value to some really low threshold, so I'm catching a lot of cases that are borderline, right? And instead of rejecting them, what it means to escalate to a human is to kick them over into a support call in Amazon Connect. And then I'm doing kind of the super low threshold values. They're not fraudulent, but the moderate value ones, I can start off with humans, with human tech support, capture all that data inside Connect, and then review those cases and then adjust accordingly.
I feel like I've been boondoggled because someone from the fraud detector team just linked a document. I can't open the URL right here, but it literally says intelligent call routing using Amazon Fraud Detector and Amazon Connect. So
okay, get out of here, Amazon Fraud Detector team. Come on.
All right, at least we're not crazy. We got some sort of affirmation here. So chat, our opinions are worth something here. No, but that's that's really cool. Actually, Rob, riffing on your idea, something that would be really exciting is like, I sort of started with like your call being top of the funnel and then use Fraud Detector to filter people out. The really exciting thing with your example is that, like, let's say folks, their contact point could be an email, right? Like, you could actually auto escalate to a phone call or something, let's say, or give a phone number as a response depending on whether it's fraudulent or not. And that's something that you would not want to email back to all emails, but that's actually a really cool use case. Yeah, you could use that in so many ways, either like text as your ingestion point, you could use emails, even just rerouting, which I'm assuming is that link in there, rerouting based on the audio data from what they said, where you don't have to, again, give them 50 phone trees and you assume that only a human would go through all of it and be routed effectively. You can simply just determine all of that from the audio at the start of the call.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, good to see that we're not the only ones to see that this is a good pair.
Means we're not 2.5 hours of streaming. 2.5 hours of streaming, and we still got it. We're right on the money. At least I think so. So, cool. Well, a shorter episode than usual. 2 launches instead of 3, but we can't reveal what's coming up in the next episode or 2. But some very exciting stuff, and feel a little passé saying that because. I say all the time I'm excited about the launches, and I hope some of the audience members are too. But we've had various sessions so far where it's like this has been the biggest episode of AWS What's Next yet, and hard to say that for sure, but the only way you'll be able to find out in the audience is if you tune back in. We've got some new visual effects playing on the stream today, which we're a little excited about. To keep up to date with us here at What's Next, you can follow myself and Rob on Twitter. We try to tweet out whenever we're going live, but we're on a bi-weekly cadence, so every 2 weeks. Same time, same place, twitch.tv/AWS. You should be able to see that in the social banner, or you're here watching already. We are on LinkedIn Live as well, so if you're tuning in from that platform, hello and welcome. And then also VODs will be available. I know this is a question that comes up a lot in chat. Folks are wondering if they can rewatch this at their leisure. Maybe they came in midway through. Those VODs, those on-demand videos will be available here at Twitch, as well as on YouTube at some point, but I don't know, when exactly they'll come around. But Rob, for folks where, watching a video may not be their cup of tea, or they're interested in listening along, I think we have another place to direct to those people.
Yeah, that's right. We are apparently available as a podcast as well on every major podcast platform that people.
Yeah, 5, 6, 7, one of those numbers, or I'm within one standard deviation, I would hope, in terms of the number of platforms. I think on our bumper screen for Be Right Back, it says Apple Podcasts and Spotify, amongst many others. So if you'd like to listen along or have this, while you're going for a walk or a run, what have you, wherever you listen to podcasts, it's available on those platforms. So we're quite excited about that.
And if you are listening to this on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you, because I'm interested in knowing how we can improve the show. I know there are a lot of visual elements, but if this is the primary way that you consume the show, let us know, and let us know how we
Yeah,
can make better.
we emphasize the live aspect here, and especially with the video component, but that doesn't mean that when we're going to release this as our future episodes on podcasts, that we can't make changes, chop it up, and make it as pleasurable of an experience as possible. Let us know if you only want to hear the speaking part and chop out all the demo, or any crazy ideas. We're receptive to that. So
Let us know if you want us to redact PII.
That would be a really interesting just run an entire show where we run it through Connect and we redact all people's names the entire time.
The whole thing. I wonder what it would think though of the sentiment. Oh man,
we'll
we
got to
reach out to Yasser.
Some homework on our side.
Yeah.
But even if you are not watching the show on the podcast, or sorry, listening to the show on the podcast, it would be difficult to watch a podcast. We would also love to hear from you. So things you enjoy, things you didn't enjoy. We want to hear it all. We want to make a better show for you, the folks at home. All right, I think I'm running out of steam here. I guess before we close, I also wanted to give a big thank you not only to both of our guests, Yasser and Nick, but also a lot of the service team members that were hanging out in chat. I know at the top of the broadcast, we said that we want to be able to get you hands-on with these newly launched features and services, and there's outside of showing you the demo and actually, getting you hands on keyboard with it, we think that interacting with the service team is a unique opportunity we have here on this platform. So I know many of those questions did not come up verbally today, but that's only because of the great work that some of the service teams did. So, thank you again to all those folks, and thank you again to all the questions. Like, we really, really do appreciate them, and we are always happy to surface those. So, please don't stop that anytime soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, Nick, what's the air date for the next episode?
Pull up the handy dandy calendar real quick. So if we are 2 weeks from today, that would be August 21st. So August 21st, again, a Friday, same time. I believe that's, what is this, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern start time. Whatever the time is that we started today, but it will also be in the materials that we push out on our social platforms. We'll get the links to those in chat. You can see our Twitter handles on the screen as well. But, with that being said, thank you again. This here is closing out episode 9 of AWS What's Next. It's been a pleasure to have all of you along for the ride. I know Rob and I have a lot of fun doing this, and we try to, add a little flair to each episode as we go along, make the show better. So we're happy to have you all along for that growing experience and for that ride. So again, appreciate all the feedback, and we will see you back in 2 weeks here on the 21st. Take it easy, everyone.
See you again,
Have a good
everyone.
weekend.